Hey everybody, I want to do a Chris Chan video, which I haven't done in a moment. I do have more comments on the unfolding Marilyn Manson situation that I want to address and get into, but um, I those will be forthcoming. But I wanted to talk about the Chris Chan situation. Uh, and a very interesting part of what we call Christory, namely the father call. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've listened to the father call in and of itself a couple of times, and I listened to it again in a multi-part series that Smokey McGee was doing, where he was offering his commentary. And he did have some very good points throughout, and I think he tried his best to be fair, uh, even-handed to both sides. But even so, there are some things that I think he didn't understand. I think that a lot of people who are not versed in how autism works and how autistics interact with the world probably don't understand. And I want to talk about this because I think this speaks to the origins of a lot of the animosity that developed towards Chris. And so the father call, if you don't know, this was one of the many women that trolled Chris into thinking she was interested in dating him, was a girl or woman named Casey, or who went by the name of Casey. I don't know her real name, or if that's her real name or whatever. Don't know, don't care. But anyway, at one point there was a mock call conducted with her and an unknown, with her, Chris, and an unknown third party that was posing as her father. The unknown third party went by the name Matthew, again claiming to be Casey's father, and the premise of the call was that Chris was introducing himself to Matthew to get Matthew's blessing to date his daughter. Now, of course, the what has to be remembered is that the Matthew and Casey were both trolls, and Chris thinks that all of this is real. He thinks he's talking to a real dad that is. He thinks that he's talking to a real dad about the potential of dating a real woman, and he's trying to get that permission to date her. If you don't know what I'm referring to, go ahead and look up Chris Chan Father Call. It runs, I think, 2 or 3 hours all total, but if you listen to about 20, 30 minutes, you'll get the gist of what happens throughout the whole call. And throughout the call, Chris is talking to a troll, an unknown troll, who is speaking into some kind of vocoder that's lowering the pitch of his voice so that he sounds older and more authoritative. It does get kind of surreal to me because it sounds like it sounds like he's talking to Duke Nukem. So I keep waiting for those alien bastards are going to pay for shooting up my ride and that kind of thing. But anyway, so it's interesting to listen to that way. But what happens throughout the call is Matthew, who is the father, the troll father, I should say, is supposed to be retired military and presents himself as being this very responsible, very responsible, very capable person, and he's disgusted by Chris and Chris's lazy behavior, his inability to function in the world and that sort of thing, or unwillingness to function in the world. And this was one of the main attempts that was made by a number of people that thought they might be able to troll Chris into doing better. And it's a very, it's an interesting reverse psychology kind of thing. And the thing is, there is a way in which something like this might work. The thing is, it might work on someone who is neurotypical, not someone like Chris who is autistic. And here's the thing. There is sociologically, and this is not a politically correct observation, but the truth often is not, but from a sociological standpoint, the way men bond in groups is by challenging each other in small ways. They challenge each other and test each other's resolve in little ways, and this is especially true in things like, military and situations like that, where they're going to have to be working together under extreme pressure and extreme circumstances. Sociologically, neurotypical men will challenge each other will challenge each other in small ways and test each other's resolve, and it's a way of forming a bond. And from an evolutionary standpoint, they bond over this because we're thinking, the more I can challenge this person, the greater an ally he will be in protecting helping me protect the tribe. And so the more that he shows himself, the more I respect this person, and that sort of thing. And so based on that, a neurotypical man can be motivated to improve themselves with the kind of tough love, harsh treatment that quote unquote Matthew is presenting here. And so so it can work. The problem is that someone like Chris does not bond this way. Chris is not capable on a sociological level. And I should emphasize, if you're just coming to this, I am on the autism spectrum myself. I am extraordinarily high functioning, especially compared to Chris. But there are things within this that I can relate to and I can understand. I don't bond with men this way. I can joke around and kid around and tease with my guy friends and everything, and we can mess with each other, but it's after a larger bond is already formed. I don't bond based on this, and I have very little patience and time for men who do bond this way. Even if I know and understand what's going on, I still just find it tedious and annoying, whereas other guys may find this ingratiating and may see it as an opportunity to bond with this group. This is where hazing rituals and that sort of thing are born out of, that same impulse. And so because men on the autism spectrum don't bond with other men on this in this manner, they come off as being aloof, dishonest, untrustworthy, that sort of thing, because they don't know how to connect on that kind of gut level with other men. Now, to be very clear, Chris is not, there's no potential for Chris to do that in this situation, even if he was neurotypical. He's being set up to fail. And the thing is, it's trolling, but it's trolling that they're doing with a proactive intent towards trying to get Chris to realize all of these problems that he has in his life. And to be very clear, these are legitimate problems that they're trying to get across to him, that this is his chronic unemployment, his unwillingness to rise to the occasion, his horrible diet, his complete absence of a workout or health regimen of any kind. All of these things that they're bringing up, these are legitimate concerns. These are things that he should be, that anybody should be taking action to correct in their lives to the extent that they're capable of doing so. And Chris is not capable, in being neuroatypical, he's not capable of functioning off of that bond that he's having, that bond that most men forge with each other that way. And if you want an extreme but great example of what I'm talking about, look at Fight Club. The only book that gets discussed on the internet I know, or movie, whatever. But anyway, in Fight Club, why look at Fight Club. Look at any movie or any book where men join the army and are horribly abused by a drill sergeant only to emerge as better people as a result of it, and they emerge grateful to that drill sergeant for treating them horribly. An Officer and a Gentleman is a great example. An Officer and a Gentleman, if you ever seen it, it's a phenomenal movie, and it's about the core of it is this relationship between Richard Gere who is giving the performance of his life, and Louis Gossett Jr., who's giving the performance of his life. about Richard Gere joining the army because he has some vague concept that things aren't going well in his life. He's a kind of philandering drunk loser, and he's aware that something's not going right in his life, but he doesn't have a full concept of it. And he basically joins the army and ends up having Louis Gossett Jr. beat the point into him, just beat it into him, everything that's wrong with him. And he comes to that realization, and there is that combative, competitive nature among men that, if you watch the movie, and this is not a movie where there's really a lot to give away, but by the end of it, Richard Gere has become the officer and a gentleman that he aspired to be, not really knowing that was what he wanted, but needing direction in his life to get there. And he's grateful to the Louis Gossett Jr. character for putting him through a hell that would break just about anybody. He's grateful for it. That kind of sociological development among men is not something that Chris is capable of doing. And the reason he's not capable of doing it, it's something I struggle to understand in my own life. I'm able to identify it where Chris is not, but even so, it's not something I like to connect to or deal with or anything like that. But what Chris does not understand, autistics have a real problem speaking in the moment. The more severe the case of autism, the more difficult they're going to have of a time speaking in the immediate moment and putting pieces, intuitively understanding things automatically in the moment. So what the Matthew character is looking for in Chris, what he's trying to incur in him, that light bulb moment of trying to challenge him and push him with a sense of competition for that light bulb moment, is never going to come. It can't come. Chris can't get to that point. This is why, by the way, people have pointed out that Chris sounds a lot more intelligent and coherent in text messages than he does in immediate spoken interactions. And that's because, like a lot of autistics, in text messages, he's able to take longer to put thoughts together. He's able to allow time to pass and think of things in retrospect and that sort of thing. So a lot of autistics communicate better with the written word than they do in immediate speech. So there's that. And and this is the reason I bring all of this up, is because so much of the animosity that has been directed at Chris has been directed at things like laziness and a lack of motivation and his willingness to just sit around and mooch off the system and things like that. And the people come at him with this frustration and anger like that. And I understand the frustration, first of all, that you would have, especially people like Megan Schroeder who have had to interact with him directly. I understand that frustration, and you're totally right to have that frustration. It is aggravating. I get that. But what happens, so again, I am not a mental health professional. This is what I know from my own research and my own reading. If I'm getting this wrong, please correct me, or if there's a mental health professional person that might be watching this and have some additional insight, I'd love to hear from you. But basically what happens when any of us when we're approached by potential danger, what happens is the autonomic nervous system kicks in and shuts us down. We shut down. And it doesn't, what that looks like, this is what that looks like. It looks like you're being lazy. It looks like you're just sitting around. And this is something that parents of so-called lazy or slacker kids don't understand. They think their kids are, they think that their kids are being slackers that don't care about life or don't care about their future or anything like that, when really what's actually happening is the reason, we're talking about teenagers here, the reason the kids are shutting down is because what they perceive, they're confronting something in their life, which is agency, and agency is can be a lot more terrifying than you think. Up until this point, they've been cheerful and enthusiastic about life and happy and upbeat because they're kids and they know that they don't have to take on any responsibility for their own lives. Mom and dad are covering everything. They can be blissful and carefree and fun. Then they get into their teenage years and they start to have responsibilities, and they start to have a cognitive awareness that they are going to have to take responsibility for their lives and function in the world, and that mom and dad aren't going to do it forever. And you have kids who have a lot of trouble dealing with that. Some kids deal with it better than others. But what's going on in the psychology of kids that appear lazy, the kids that appear to be slackers and don't care and that sort of thing, what's happening is they're really overcome. They do care. They're just overcome with what's put in front of them. They're scared. And it's the fear and the fear that they feel, it's shutting them down. It's saying, if I shut down and don't do anything, the problem will go away. And it's a very primal evolutionary thing of play dead, and it won't, and maybe the predator will go away. And that's what happens with the autonomic nervous system. And so consequently, parents become frustrated with the kid because they think, well, the kid is lazy, apathetic, doesn't care. No, it's actually the opposite. It's actually that they're overcome by how much they care. And this is where, Chris, what I bring back with Chris has never grown out of that autonomic response to the fear and the terror of embracing the world. He can't do it because he is physically, in his mental structure, physically not able to go past that point. He is functioning. He's functioning at about the level of maybe a 12-year-old at best. At that age, when kids start to get a little bit of an awareness of that of the outside world, but it's terrifying to them. That's as far as he got in his development, and it's as far as he can get in his development. And that is why people like Chris need help from counselors and therapists that actually know what's going on and actually know how to help them. Because a neurotypical person like the Richard Gere character in An Officer and a Gentleman that has a problem with apathy in their lives, an ingrained sense of apathy that's the result of feeling out of control of their lives and like they can't function properly in the world and they're afraid of it, that person can be spurred to action by yelling at them. That's the kind of person that can go join the football team and be yelled at by their coach. They can go join the ROTC and be yelled at by the drill sergeant. And being shocked into action is all they need to start functioning. And once they're shocked into action, once they get rolling, they're able to take care of it. They're able to handle it. That will not work with Chris. All he does is shut down. And there's a great, to show you what I'm talking about, there's this recent, I was going to do a separate video on this, but this was really my only thought on it. The Gamer from Mars channel did a whole documentary on Chris that was apparently filmed in 2019, and they interacted with Chris directly and followed him around, and were able to go into his home. They met his mother and they interviewed, him directly. What's unfortunate is they got all of this footage, and what they used the footage of their direct interactions with Chris just as little bumpers to set up a kind of miniaturized version of the Geno Samuel documentary that I don't think any of us really needed at this point. What's more important is, what did you get of Chris, the insights and the information you got about Chris and the way he interacted. And there's a thing where they're sitting in this gazebo talking to Chris, and they talk about one of the trolling sagas, one of the issues that he had with somebody online, I forget which one, but Chris starts trying to summarize what happened, and he starts explaining it, and he starts trying to explain everything that happened as best he understands it, and his voice starts getting faster and faster and faster and more unintelligible, until finally he just goes, ah, like that for an extended period, closes his eyes and goes, ah, for an extended period. And I can tell you what's happening with his psychology right there, because while I don't act that way outwardly, I've experienced that sort of thing inwardly. The best example, look at the movie Blade Runner. Most people have seen Blade Runner. So if you haven't, why are you watching this video? Go see Blade Runner. Go see the final cut, because that's one of the few instances where a re-edited, re-released movie was actually done correctly in the re-edit, because that's the version Ridley Scott wanted us to see all along. Anyway, in Blade Runner, the backstory is that there are these humanoid android, these very human-looking androids called replicants, and they are indistinguishable from humans, but they are also super strong, super intelligent killing machines. And so to weed them out within the human population, they screen people with what's called a Voight-Kampff test. And the Voight-Kampff test is meant to check for minute reactions in a person's face, and their face, their pulse, their speech patterns, and their responses and everything to various questions, to determine whether a person is real or an android. And at the beginning of the movie, we see a character named Leon being given the Voight-Kampff test. That's where the movie opens. Leon's being given the Voight-Kampff test, and we get the impression that the character that Leon presents, he seems like a kind of standard blue-collar worker kind of guy, a good old boy type person. And, everything's kind of like this and everything. And at one point, he is asked a question that sets him off. And the question is that the interviewer says, you come upon a turtle laying on its back, and the turtle is kicking in the air, trying to turn over. If it doesn't turn over, it will die. You should turn it over, but you don't. You could turn it over, but you don't. Why don't you turn over the turtle? And Leon freezes, and he's stuck like a deer in headlights thinking about this. And the thing is, a human, and what they're working off of is a human would just brush it off. The human's like, I don't know. But an android has to compute that. They have to compute all of the variables and come up, a machine would have to compute all of the variables and come up with the most likely explanation for why they're not doing it. And eventually the question eats at Leon to the point that he explodes, or he literally explodes, but he attacks and kills the interviewer, revealing that he is in fact an android. And the thing is, that's basically what's happening to Chris. And it's interesting to me because, characters, one of the main characters that autistic people get compared to is Data from Star Trek Next Generation. So an android and functioning and thinking like an android. And I honestly think an autistic person would probably, if they were given the Voight-Kampff test, would probably be misidentified as an android for that reason, because what's happening to Chris when he starts trying to compute, you hear him trying to compute all of this information, and finally he stops and goes, that's literally like the blue screen of death on a desktop operating system, or if it's Mac, the rainbow wheel of death. That's literally what's happening in his brain. And so just like you could become frustrated with your computer for shutting down in a circumstance like that, it would be still ridiculously irrational to become angry at a computer for that. Chris is thinking and functioning the same way. Chris would fail the Voight-Kampff test. And so why do I bring all of this up? Because this interview with, or this exchange between Matthew and Chris, it really is like a Voight-Kampff test. And Smokey's commentary is actually, Smokey McGee, by the way, his commentary is really great on explaining how a neurotypical person would interpret what's being said. Because one of the things that he talks about a lot is Chris and honesty, Chris's supposed dishonesty. Now, don't get me wrong, there are things where Chris has blatantly lied and prevaricated to benefit himself. He is still human and given to those same impulses. That is true. But the dishonesty that they're referring to, the dishonesty that they keep referring to is things like, the Matthew character says, "You don't care about Casey." And Chris says, no, I do care. And one of the examples towards the very end of the call, one of the things Smokey points out is that Casey is crying, or was said she's crying. It's bullshit, obviously, but they say that Casey's crying and ran out, leaving the room, and Chris does not express any concern for Casey's well-being. He doesn't say he doesn't express any concern for Casey that she's run out of the room, and they're correct that a neurotypical man probably would say, well, how's Casey doing? I want to talk to her. I'm concerned about her. That sort of thing. As bizarre as it sounds, when they're saying, Casey was crying and you didn't ask how she was doing, you're lying when you say you say you care, and Chris is saying, no, I do care. I promise you he does care, or he did care in that moment. I promise you he did. I promise you he cared a lot. I promise you that any autistic person you put in that situation would care and did care. The problem is not that he doesn't care. It's that when they're confronted with the information, Casey is crying. Casey is crying. What they're hearing is, what that person is hearing, the autistic person is hearing, is not, you need to express concern for Casey's well-being to prove that you care about her, which again, that is the neurotypical challenge the man to rise up to the occasion socialization process, that if he were neurotypical, that would get through to him. That would be an indicator that he didn't care if he were neurotypical. But he's not. What you're saying is, what he's thinking is, when he hears angry person says Casey is crying, Casey is having this emotional response, what he is literally hearing is, Leon, why aren't you flipping over the turtle? And again, this is why, everyone talks about Chris had all of these opportunities to improve his situation that he didn't take. And don't get me wrong, Chris has done some very, very wrong things that he should be held accountable for, the most severe of which obviously was sexually prevailing on his elderly mother. But the thing is, when people start using his failures to function properly in the world as an internalized justification for their own animosity towards him, when frustration gives way to animosity and that sort of thing, that's where we need to understand literally any person who is autistic to the degree that Chris is. And I have had situations where people have tried this shit with me, and it took me a long time to figure out what was actually going on, but I got it. Chris will never get it. Anyone that is functioning at his level is not going to get it. This would have been any autistic person you dropped into this situation. And so really, the father call, it's fascinating to listen to. There are parts where it does get ridiculously funny. The characters get so ridiculously exaggerated that it starts to be hilarious. When Matthew is sitting there going, you know what I was doing on September 11th? I was pulling my mother out of the rubble of the Twin Towers. It's obvious. I mean, the bullshit gets ridiculous at that point. And it's just, it's so over the top. And so, but I bring it back around to autistic males don't bond with other males in this manner of, I'm going to challenge you to see how you rise to the occasion. They don't bond that way. A lot of autistic men get along better with girls, especially at a younger age, because they don't bond in this way of challenging one another. Girls as kids will do, there's the frenemies thing. That's a little bit different. That's not, I'm challenging you because I want to see you rise to the occasion. That's, I was pretending to be your friend all along. That's a very different sociological phenomenon. But autistic men very often will have an easier time at the friendship level, not the romantic level, but at the friendship level, interacting with women for this reason. And if you watch throughout the history of so-called Christory, the majority of the people that were able to form friendships with him, even the so-called trollsome gal pals, were uh, female. His the majority of his friends, even though again most of them were fake or paid off in some way when he was in school, it was girls that were able to function with him and work with him because girls don't have this sociologically don't have this competitive thing that Matthew is trying to employ with Chris. So this is a long point, a long comment to say, if you are looking at this situation and thinking that Chris is apathetic, that he doesn't care, that he, all of the accusations, apathetic, lazy sack of shit, doesn't care, all of that, you're not getting how autistic people function. The Matthew character was never going to be able to get these points across to Chris. Rocky Schumacher was never going to be able to get these points across to Chris because she's not an actual therapist and she doesn't have the actual ability to function, to help autistic people. But this is an example of where the blind madcap lunacy of the internet really did fail Chris. And I know everybody says, oh, but if Chris wanted to improve his situation, he could have. I'm telling you, the shutdown is real. And that there are millions, something I know that gets discussed on the Kiwi farms and everything like this is that there are millions of Chris Chans out there that we just don't know about and we don't hear anything about. And that's true. And I promise you, for all of them, the shutdown is real. And if you try to motivate them to action by kind of ironically antagonizing them like what Matthew is doing, all you're going to get is shutdown. And all you're going to get is fuel for your confirmation bias that the person you're talking to is lazy and all of that. I assure you that's not the case. And so I promise you, in his own way, in his own small, odd way, Chris did care about Casey to the extent that he could care about her. And it's portrayed throughout, the way his girl interactions and everything, his romantic interactions and everything are portrayed. It's portrayed as like he just gets swept along in one bullshit thing after another, and it's all nonsense, and he doesn't really care. He just wants to get laid. I think after a point, he just wanted to get laid because he was getting frustrated. But I promise you, he went into those things caring and wanting to care, and thinking that he was caring and not knowing how. It's very, very, one of the reasons Chris, she's been fed. Okay. Anyway, one of the reasons, Chris, screws everything up with these things, one of the things that's talked about in the father call is, it's like, you tried to touch Casey on the first date? What's wrong with you, you pervert? Okay. Autistic men, autistic people in general, have trouble abstracting. They have trouble thinking in the abstract. So they have to do concrete, specific, they feel like if they're not doing specific concrete gestures to communicate something, then that thing is not being communicated at all. So what am I talking about? It's things like that. Chris is not capable of thinking, looking at the, something like walking around. Who was was it Jackie that did the Pickle Man thing? He's not capable of walking around the mall and just talking to somebody, because as far as he's concerned, or as far as he sees the world, that just talk, he doesn't understand that talking is building a rapport and building a relationship that's going to could eventually evolve into romance. Not that actual situation ever could, because it was a setup, but I'm saying in general, he doesn't understand that that's what happens, that you're interacting with somebody, you're building a rapport, you're getting comfortable with them, that the potential for a relationship is always there and it's always building as this is going. What he thinks is, if I'm not making an actual romantic gesture, then romance is not occurring, romance is not building. There has to be something literal happening. And this is something, as embarrassing as it is to admit, this is something I've done as an autistic person trying to navigate the world, where I don't do it anymore because I've given up on dating and have no interest in doing it. But when I would go on dates in the past, I would do first dates where, I'd take the girl to a really nice restaurant on the first date, and they would, it would scare them away because they're like, oh my God, we're not at this point yet. Like a super nice restaurant, or try to do some romantic gesture like that on the first date and that kind of thing. And it's because it's like you think, I have to do something, I can't do something abstract. Abstract doesn't make sense. What concrete is what makes sense. Think about how love is conveyed in movies. Look at a kind of a romance montage and a romantic comedy where it's one scene they're I don't know, eating cake at a buffet and shoving it in each other's faces playfully, and in the next scene they're they're laughing until they fall over, hugging, and these kinds of specific things rather than gradual abstractions. This is what autistics have trouble with. So they think, well, I have to go to these specific things. I saw a lecture by a gentleman, I can't think of who it was, but I think it was a TED Talk actually, where he was, no, it wasn't, it was something different, but he was giving a presentation on autistic men and dating, and he talked about a patient that he worked with as a therapist. He talked about a patient he worked with who was an autistic man that got a date, and he was so excited that he got a date, and he was so excited, so through the roof. And so what he did was he thought, well, should I bring flowers or chocolates? For first date, you should bring neither one. But, should I bring flowers or chocolates? He couldn't decide, so he got both. He rented a limousine and a tuxedo and showed up at her door in all of this, wearing all of this nonsense with a, limousine and everything. And she went on the date to kind of go along with it. And be nice and everything, but of course he never saw her again and couldn't understand why. And it's because the grand romantic gestures are the only things they understand. And this is where the C word starts getting applied to autistic men. The word creepy. Women live in fear of slut shaming, men live in fear of creep shaming, and autistic men get hit with that word creepy all the time, and that's a fucking scarlet letter, man. Once you get hit with that, it changes, it changes how you feel about yourself, how you feel about other people, that kind of thing. It's an embarrassing thing, and it's a heavy load to take on. And so that's what's going on there. And that's what all of these people none of them understand it literally, because none of these people that are trolling Chris knew how autistics actually think. But at the same time, they don't understand it. They don't want to understand it, and it's the kind of thing that's not understood and not advocated for properly. So that is, now again, there are real problems that are unique to Chris. For example, there is an arrogant attitude that was instilled in him by the Chandler family, a very stuck-up attitude, that a very how dare you criticize me kind of attitude that is especially unique to Barbara Chandler and everything, and the Chandlers being so deeply resentful of the suggestion that there was something mentally wrong with their son at an early age. All of that was a behavior model that was instilled in him unintentionally to have this very haughty attitude. Those are things that are legit problems that are unique to Chris. But I promise you, there are so many things in the father call like that are textbook examples of what autistic people deal with, so especially men deal with sociologically. And again, it's not a politically correct observation, but it is a true observation that in the world we live in, however, if you want to write it off as patriarchy or whatever, that's fine, but in the world that we live in, women are given default value for the fact that they're women, whereas men are expected to go out and prove themselves. And so that is That's the reality of how it functions, and because of that, autistic men are put in a very specific place of difficulty trying to prove themselves in the world. With autistic women, I'm rambling at this point, I'll wrap it up, but with autistic women, the opposite is often true, where, for example, promiscuity can become an issue because they don't have a good filtering mechanism for the quality and kind of men that they're bringing into their lives, and they don't know how to suss out who is and is not on the up and up. I have actually, I was about to say, I have the book where I read that. I believe it's, no, that's, okay, I've got the Tony Atwood book, that's not it. I think it's called Autism and Sexuality. It was written by a man and a woman who are both autistic, but the woman talked about that, Asperger's and sexuality, I think it was, but the woman talked about that. So that's often an issue with women. Anyway, these are real things. And if these things could have been understood by somebody, by anybody in Chris's life, things could have been very different. If he could have gotten with somebody who really knows this shit. But you have to remember one thing. Chris is about a year and a half older than me. And in our generation, like, this stuff, I was not diagnosed until I was in college. And I was one of the lucky ones to be diagnosed that young. Nowadays, it's far more common for people to be diagnosed as being autistic because we're more accepting of talking about mental health disorders, and two, we have a better knowledge of what autism is and what it encompasses. But I was one of the lucky ones because I at least got diagnosed at that point. Chris got diagnosed much younger. But even still, there was very little that was actually understood about it. And a lot of the, people like Tony Atwood, who I mentioned, people like Temple Grandin, a lot of their advocacy really came to the public fore. They'd been working in advocacy prior, but a lot of their knowledge and their understanding and their advice and insight into autism did not even start to really come to the public forum and to the public stage until the mid-2000s, at which point people like me and Chris were adults. So that's a very significant thing, and this is a newly emergent issue in terms of understanding it. There was a time when the only time autism was diagnosed or addressed was when it was in extremely severe cases. And believe it or not, Chris would still, in comparison to the extreme cases I'm talking about, Chris would even still, compared to that, be considered relatively high functioning. So now we have a much better understanding of it, but it is a very sad thing that there was no understanding, and there was no understanding person provided to Chris who could actually work with him, and the Chandlers actively rejected anybody that could have helped him, like putting him in a special needs school and that sort of thing. And furthermore, the trolls obviously were never going to help with that. But what I want to try to get across in the understanding of Chris Chan, as Geno Samuel begins every episode of his documentary, what made him this way? That's the first thing he asks. I'm telling you, if you want an answer to that question, you're going to have to let go of the idea that Chris is simply motivated by an arrogant personal disregard for other people, that he was motivated by just general laziness, that he just wanted to be a fat slob or anything like that. I promise you, he truly wanted to be that person for Casey. I promise you that. And as bizarre as it sounds, and I know it's defying all of your senses and everything you know about Chris, but I promise you that was true. And again, like I said, I'm not pretending that Chris is not horrible in his own right. What he did to his mother is horrible, unacceptable. He is a danger to himself and others. But it didn't have to be like this. And if these kinds of things could have been understood earlier, he could have been helped. So anyway, those are my thoughts about the father call. I wanted to pass that insight along, and look forward to hearing anything any information that anyone might have to contribute to that, any insights, any thoughts, comments, that sort of thing. So, peace out.